Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Bodhi Tree Buddhism Community. We are this week on week 4, or class 4 of our course series on Buddhism psychology, Buddhist psychology. So if you are tuning in to our live stream here on Facebook today, please drop a message. Oh, I see. Already got a message from Mika first. Okay, Mika, you are first. Good to see you back again this morning. If anyone else is out there, please drop a message in there. I see we've got Mark with us as well. Good to see you back again, Mark. I see you've been busy lately giving those extra courses on IT and the law. And if anyone else is there, please tune in, drop us a message. It's always good to see who is watching. So my name is Matt Osborne. I'm based here in Taiwan and live streaming, of course, live streaming to the whole world. It's morning where I am, though I know some of you are tuning in from different times, different places. It's good to see you all. This week we are continuing with our course on Buddhist psychology, and we're up to week 4. And week 4, our topic is on the storehouse consciousness, or we could say in slightly more less technical jargon, we're talking about the Buddhist view, or one particular Buddhist take on the subconscious mind or the unconscious mind. So that's gonna tail in from the last couple of weeks as well. So there's kind of a bit of review, and there's going to also be some wider implications for this idea. Okay, I see we've got quite a few people tuning in here. We've got GW Pasquale, good morning. We've got Suk In Wan, good morning as well. And Li Ping, thank you very much for teaching us. You're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, and Jay Lee, good morning to you as well. Okay, so good to see all your messages. Reminds me, or tells me that at least my live stream is working and things aren't falling apart on the technical side. So I'm going to cut over now onto the PowerPoint and we can kind of pick it up from there, shall we? Okay, let me cut. Okay, that should bring us to the PowerPoint. Okay, so you've seen this picture before, kind of a Buddha on one side and some kind of brain scan on the other side. And just a little reminder where we are in the whole kind of program. We're past halfway. Last week was week 3, so finish of last week was halfway. We first talked about body and mind in the Buddhist view, and we talked about how Buddhism, it does accept, well, kind of in general and just regular terms, it does accept some kind of reality to the material world, but it also doesn't believe that the material world is the soul or the entirety of our reality or experience world, and that we also have some kind of cognitive, mental, conscious side as well. We talked about the 5 aggregates, which was a really good system for looking at the different parts that constitute ourselves and other people in general, of which one part is the material part, the rupa, the material form, but the other 4 of the 5 aggregates are the mental side, including kind of bare consciousness itself, our feelings or sensations, perceptions and ideas that use words and language, and different emotions and kind of emotional responses to things. In week 2, we talked about this process of sense perception and kind of taking those 5 aggregates and showing that there's kind of, they're not just 5 different categories of things, but they also are related together. And we see that most clearly through the perception process, cognitive process. And then last week we talked about afflictive emotions and views. So we kind of expanded out from this process of sensory perception, how we see things or hear, smell, taste, touch things, or even perceive things with our mind. But then also, due to certain elements of that process, how we are prone at certain points in that process to arise these afflictions. And we talked about those in 2 basic categories. One is kind of the emotional afflictions, in particular desire and aversion, but then also views, which can include a kind of an ignorance as well. And these are 2 broad categories for looking at afflictions. And, you know, we didn't really touch on it too much, but it's I think a lot of you probably already know, but one of the important reasons why we're talking about these afflictions is because within this whole kind of Buddhist path, we have dissatisfaction because we have these afflictions. We have these afflictions and they create our dissatisfaction. And so part of the whole, well, not part of, basically the entirety of the Buddhist path is removing those afflictions. If we get rid of the afflictions, we get rid of the dissatisfaction and the suffering that they bring about. So then this week we're going to go into the storehouse consciousness, and that's going to deepen our understanding of how those afflictions come about and where they kind of come from. And then once we've got that in mind, we can then talk about the meditative mind and what it means for the mind to be liberated in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so far so good. So there we go, week 4, storehouse consciousness. I'm kind of using this term storehouse. It's a fairly common expression in English language Buddhism, and we'll talk a little bit more about that specific term in a minute. Okay, so everything good so far? Okay, I see we've got a few more people tuning in. We've got our regular old crew there. Chen Mei Fang, good to see you as always, and thanks for sharing. And also Jonathan, thanks for sharing also the post and letting others know that we're going to have the class. We've got Alexander tuning in. I have no idea where you are these days, Alexander. I'm guessing you're back in Canada, but maybe not. And also Terry, of course. Thanks, Terry, for your continued support. Okay, so talking about this whole idea of the storehouse consciousness or the subconscious mind, here is a picture of an iceberg. Okay, now I used to use this picture in a talk I used to give on Buddhist psychology over the years. Maybe some of you watching have actually heard me give this talk, maybe more than once. Okay, I admit that I'm rehashing old material, but I always used to show this picture, and it's a picture of an iceberg. That's pretty clear, but of course it's a picture of an iceberg that we can see from the side, so we're not just seeing like the top of the iceberg, the bit that floats in the water. We're seeing the whole body of the iceberg, which is underneath the water, and that was kind of one of the key points that I wanted to get across in this. I think if I understand from some classes related to chemistry back as an undergraduate, that we all know when water freezes, it actually becomes less dense than liquid water, and that's a very special thing about water. Most other things, when they go from liquid to a solid state, they actually become more dense and then they sink. Water, for some weird reason, doesn't. It expands and thus it becomes lighter, but it only expands a little bit. So about 10% of a piece of ice, including an iceberg, is above the water, 90% is below. And so this image of an iceberg, I think, was used by Sigmund Freud when he was talking about the subconscious mind, or maybe later on somebody kind of just used this metaphor and it wasn't Freud himself, that what we experience, the conscious mind, is the amount of the iceberg above the waterline. That's what we can see. But we've got to keep in mind that there's a whole lot more to the iceberg below the waterline. And when I'd be talking about this, it would always make me think of, the story of the Titanic, and not necessarily thinking of the movie The Titanic, just the Titanic in general. That they're in this unsinkable ship, supposedly unsinkable ship, crossing the Atlantic, and they encounter this iceberg, and you can just kind of imagine if you're in a boat and what you see of the iceberg, it's not enough to just avoid hitting the iceberg you see. The iceberg sticks out further out on the edges, so you've got to give it a lot of depth. And what's below there is potentially very dangerous. And while with the iceberg it's like 10% above the waterline and 90% below the waterline, I think probably in terms of our mental entirety, kind of the entirety of our cognitive mental states, how much of that is kind of above the waterline at any point and how much of it is below the waterline. It's definitely not like 10%, 90%. How much can we have in our mind at any given time. I mean, what I can see and hear and smell and taste and think right now, but think of all the, think of just the huge amount of memories and impressions and knowledge and information that we have in our minds that we can draw on, that can potentially come out, but it isn't all totally present in our minds at once. It's not 10%, 90%. It's not even 1%, 99%. It's this tiny, tiny, tiny little dot that is presently conscious, and this massive amount that isn't. And also within that, there's potentially, at least from a Buddhist point of view, and we'll get to this in a minute, the amount that's below the surface that we might not even have come to the surface ever. How much is that? We really don't know. So it's something interesting to kind of keep in mind, that the subconscious amount is absolutely massive. And like the captain of the Titanic, you always got to keep a lookout for the hidden icebergs. Okay. Now, we're going to get back to this little diagram. We know this diagram, everyone? Okay, you've seen this diagram before. I just want to pop back and make sure, because when I'm looking at the PowerPoint, I can't see the Facebook to see if everything's going okay there. Okay, I see Alexander's in Kamakura. Okay, you're in Japan. No wonder you can tune in. Otherwise, it's probably like 10 o'clock at night back in Ontario. Okay, glad you can tune in anyway. Okay, we're getting back to this little diagram. Okay, I know I'm pushing this diagram many times, but I find it useful. Okay, so we previously saw this process from our sense organs and sense objects. So it might be your eyes and the computer screen in front of you right now, or it might be the sound of my voice and something coming through your earphones right now. The sound. Sorry, my voice coming through your earphones and your ears. Sorry, the objects and the sense organs. These are often physical matter, and then over time we then next have cognition. So this is this bare state of being conscious of something. Seeing, right? Just seeing or just hearing. And remember, the first step, just seeing or hearing, is kind of irrespective of content. It's not saying you're seeing the screen, because as soon as we say it's the screen, we're actually past just cognition itself, and we're already into like perceptions, for example. We have sensations. So these are the experiences that might be pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, and they might bring about, potentially, but not certainly, bring about desire and aversion, for example. Pleasant sensations might lead to desire, or unpleasant, painful sensations might lead to aversion. Okay. After the sensations, we might have perceptions, and they may include, the perceptions themselves are things like, looking at my computer, I'm seeing a bird flying in the sky. That's a car driving across the road, so don't cross the road at the moment. Okay, using words and language and concepts in order to label things, and so that itself is not a problem. But what we often then do with those perceptions and those ideas and concepts is we start to reform them and reshape them around this sense of self. And so, it's not just a case of like, if I look at my hand, I don't just see a hand, I see my hand, right? And if at the moment, if I look and I see this computer in front of me, I don't just see a computer. I don't just see a Asus Zen book. Yeah, I know it's cheesy. I've got a Zen book. I don't have a thing. I didn't buy it specifically because it's a Zen book. It's actually a pretty good little laptop. I don't just see this laptop, I see my laptop. Okay, remember we also talked about this last time. And so we're constantly like conceptualizing all the things that we see in terms of self, right? And we then interact with them in very different ways depending on whether we think that they are like part of me or belong to me or also belong to others. or a part of others, because attributing something as belonging to someone else is very similar to attributing it to myself. If I think that's my cell phone, and I think that's your cell phone, it's kind of the same thing, but self and other are the same thing. And other, your cell phone is just, you are just a different me, a different I with respect to yourself. So again, this is what can often happen after these perceptions. And as I said, the desire and aversion will very often come after the sensations. These perceptions and conceptualizing things in terms of me and mine and self very often come after these perceptions. They don't have to. Okay, they're not guaranteed. And the reason why I've kind of drawn them in a slightly different way and used a different color, as we'll see in a week or two when it comes to kind of the liberated mind, objects, sense organs, cognitions, sensations, and perceptions, and also some kinds of intention, you can have like wholesome intention, are not problematic from a Buddhist worldview. These are not bad things. These are not things we want to eliminate. This is often a misunderstanding. People think like, oh, if an awakened person can't kind of have any sensations, or maybe cannot have pleasant experiences or unpleasant experiences. This is really incorrect. Okay, it's a very common misunderstanding, because pleasant experiences and unpleasant experiences and many types of perception and many types of intention are not a problem at all. But there's kind of aversion and desire, this kind of self-centered conceptualizing of the world. These are problematic. Okay, and then after these intentions, now I line up the desire, aversion, intention, and me, mine, and I put those in kind of like the same like column in the diagram, because basically the desire and aversion and the me, mine, and I are types of intention. Okay, they are types of intention. This term intention, and also I often translate it as emotion. Now I know the problem with emotion is that we wouldn't usually think of conceptualize something as like, this is my cup or this is my computer. We normally wouldn't think that's an emotion. And in English, yeah, it's correct. It doesn't work in that English term. But it's really hard to find a term that corresponds to that in the Sanskrit or Pali word, so sankhara or samskara. It includes all of those. I know I've got another friend of mine who also has a very strong interest, particularly in Jungian psychology, and he likes to translate these as complexes. And I think that's in some ways also very good. It's a very good term. Of course, a complex means it's multiple things that come together to form like a pattern of behavior, or like a complex and different relations. So in that way, it's a bit too broad, but I think that also helps to flesh out what is meant by intention. Whatever the case, these intentions, these volitions, driving forces, compounding factors, whatever term you want to use, these samskaras, they then drive, okay, they're mental, they then drive physical and verbal actions. And of course, the physical and verbal actions is moving our body, saying things. That also includes reorganizing our sense organs, so like redirecting our senses towards different objects or away from objects. And it also includes manipulating objects themselves, So if I don't have coffee in here today, if this was coffee and I drink the coffee and I really like the coffee, then I'm going to drink it again. I'm going to have the volition to take the cup and bring the cup here, which is manipulating the object. Now I'm manipulating the coffee, the object, but then I'm also putting it into my mouth. And then that's then kind of, in the sense, manipulating the sense organs with respect to the object. And then that kind of brings about this process again, right? So particularly for like desirable things. We see something we like. We see that delicious vegan pizza, and we might first walk past a shop, we might see it or smell it. Okay, it's pleasant, so we like that, and because we like these pleasant experiences, And we might read, oh, it's vegan, or vegan, delicious vegan pizza. And we think like, I'm a vegan. I'm actually not vegan. I'm vegetarian. But I just use this as an example. And so that matches my concept of who I am, right? If I said like meat lovers pizza, I'm just like, I'm out of here, man. I don't even want to smell that. And then we might stop, we might turn, we might go back to the shop, look at pictures, right? And then we order a pizza. And what we're just constantly doing is, we're going through this process, and that's the mental process. We're then changing our bodies by going back to the shop and going closer to the shop, ordering the food, right? Getting the food, sniffing the food, eating the food. And we're keeping that cycle going in order to kind of, what we're doing is maybe we're maximizing the pleasant sensations. We might be further strengthening these perceptions, and also, of course, reinforcing perceptions and self-identity by reinforcing that, right? And the cycle continues. Okay. Now, up until this point, I think this is about where we got to last week. I know, a lot of time spent on review, but I think this stuff is important. Like, I never think like, oh, just because we've covered it before, we shouldn't cover it again, right? I think a lot of these teachings are things we need to go over many times. Okay, now we've got a couple of comments here. I'm just going to pause at this point and get back and see there's a few comments. Okay, so we've got a comment here, a thought here from Alexander. Just a thought that came up regarding self-reflexive consciousness. Have I encountered Julian Jaynes' theory of consciousness and the bicameral mind? No, I have not encountered that particular theory. And the idea of self-reflexive consciousness. I'm not sure if you're meaning this in the technical kind of like Buddhist sense that comes up a bit later, particularly in general, some later forms of Mahayana Buddhism. What is it? Svasamvedana. So it's the question of, can consciousness or cognition cognize itself? So, the question of like, how do we know that we're conscious? If in Buddhist theory, to know that we're conscious, we'd have to then know consciousness. And that would mean that a cognition would have to take another cognition as an object. And there's a big problem about this in almost all the Buddhist schools, because they believe that this process happens like moment by moment. If you imagine, there's kind of like by a moment, it means it's kind of like there's like the shortest measurement of time. So in one moment there might be a cognition, the next moment it's the sensation, the next moment the perception, kind of like this. But then you'd have to have like you've got the old problem of, does the object exist in the same moment that the consciousness exists? Now, there's a long question, and I'm not going to go into all the different Buddhist takes on that. That's one difficulty, but the other one is the difficulty being that if the object exists in one moment and then the consciousness exists in the next moment, the consciousness is actually conscious of something which no longer exists, because the object only exists for a single moment and then it's gone. It's momentariness. Okay, the Buddhists kind of later become a very standard definition of momentariness. Impermanence. Things only exist for one moment. In the next moment there might be something very similar, but it's actually something different. We misperceive that as seeing things as being enduring in time, but actually it's changing every single moment. But the other thing is then having a consciousness or a cognition which cognizes another cognition. That means in the same moment you might have to have two cognitions. And again, for almost all the Buddhist schools, you can't have that. That's like a theoretical naughty. You can't do that. You can only have one cognition in any one moment. Now, I did slightly mention this, I think, last week or the week before. For most Buddhist schools that came from the Abhidharma systems, they believe that you can only have one cognition at any instant in time. So you can only be like visually conscious in one moment. And then if you are then listening to something, so you had an auditory consciousness, that couldn't be in exactly the same moment. They'd have to be separated by a moment. Now, of course, when we talk about a moment, it's such a small period of time. So you could be kind of like alternating between a visual consciousness and an auditory consciousness. And for regular people, we might think they're simultaneous. But for the Abhidharma people, they said no. So that gives a problem there. But that only applies to those schools. The Mahasamgika schools, so some other schools, believe that no, your 6 different cognitions, so visual, auditory, right? So through your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, they can all be simultaneous. And personally, I do not see any reason why that should also not be the case. So while the majority of Buddhist philosophy follows those Abhidharma traditions, I don't necessarily think that it has to be the case. And just, sorry, this is getting quite technical, I know. I think a lot of people, when they study Buddhism and they study some slightly later theories of Buddhist psychology, I don't think people realize just how much what they're studying is influenced by the Abhidharma traditions, particularly the northern Abhidharma traditions. And they think that that's just Buddhism. Buddhism must be like that, but there were early on some very different takes by other schools. It's just that sometimes those other different takes didn't necessarily become historically dominant. Okay, that's pretty technical stuff. Another question for Alexander: what is me, mine, and I? So it's just basically, it's just what's that term in Pali? It's like me, mama, aham, or something like that. Aham, mama, atman. I should know this. Okay. So it's basically saying, so me is like saying this is me. So I might look at my body and say this is me, or I might look at this cup and say it is mine, or I might say for the I, it's like self. I might think, oh, this is my soul. So maybe consciousness, I think like, oh, this is my soul, or this is my kind of essential self. So they do have some slight differences and kind of technical differentiation, but if we just want to think of it in general terms, it is identifying it with self or what belongs to a self. So me or belongs to me. And sometimes I also like to think of this kind of metaphorically, like distance-wise. If we imagine the sense of self, me or I at the center, and then surrounding that we have things that belong to me, so mine. And the further we go from the self and the center, then it starts to become other. And we kind of like try to shape, we tend to view and shape our world conceptually with that me at the core. Okay, James takes consciousness to mean self-awareness, so I don't think it corresponds to Vijnana. Yeah, correct, because in Vijnana does not mean self-awareness at all. But I think what he's referring to is closer to what you indicated by me, mine, and I. What he argues is that self-awareness is a culturally conditioned state of mind. Well, yeah, definitely in terms of what we consider me, mine, and I is also partly culturally conditioned. That's very true. Like a classic example of that would just be simply something like almost all cultures, people tend to take their own bodies. Even when I say it in English, their own bodies, I just assume, right? I, whatever that is, take this thing, this physical body, as me, or I might think of it as mine. Sometimes I might say my arm, but sometimes I might, if somebody hits my arm, I say you've hit me. So that's a bit of a blurred line. But then when it comes to particularly things like mine, like maybe more capitalist societies, individualistic societies might be more likely to take things like this belongs to me, this is me, this is mine, this is my house, or this is my car, these are my possessions. Some other maybe more community-based cultures might not. Maybe if you like live in a house with your family, there might be things that you don't necessarily think belong to me, that you might think they belong to my family in a narrow sense or a broader sense. Or there might be things that we might think belong to a community. This is public property. So we might think, well, I'm part of the public, so it kind of partly belongs to me, but it also belongs to others. But we might also have, but even something like, imagine if we think of like a forest. Humans are weird, when you think about it. We think like, oh, this forest belongs to this landlord or something like that, the person who owns the forest. Or we might think this is government forest land or state forest or public forest. But there might also be some people that think like, to be honest, why does a forest belong to a human at all? Why doesn't the forest just kind of belong to itself? Why do humans have dominion over the forests? It's a very good question, right? And like you say, a lot of these can be culturally conditioned. There might be certain societies that don't necessarily think that every square inch of land on the planet somehow belongs to some country. And what is a country other than, again, another form of culturally prescribed, entity? So yes, these are all good examples of showing how a lot of that culture can help to build up these concepts. Okay, let us continue. Where are we here? Okay, so we've got to this point. Now the more new material for today. Now, the thing is, this goes further than that. I'm going to add in one more line. So you might see that there's supposed to be a line that goes from this desire and aversion and this views of me, mine, and I, and these intentions in general. So when these are experienced in the mind, they also drop in underlying seed potentials. Now I'm going to use this term seed potentials here. And partly because what we're talking about today, the storehouse consciousness, the alaya consciousness, uses this term. So in Yogacara Buddhism, we see this term seeds. When we have these intentions and volitions and emotions, they drop seeds back into the mind. And also you can see this term here, underlying seed potentials, is also an arrow pointing back up this way. So what I mean to say is, also when we have these sensations, let's say we have a pleasant sensation and it gives rise to desire. So why? Where did that desire come from? And so again, in this model, the sensation is a stimulus for this underlying seed potential for desire. So within our mind, we have this seeded potential for desire, but it's not active. We don't see it like the iceberg beneath the water. When the sensation comes along, it stimulates the seed, and the seed grows and sprouts into actual desire. But then with the actual desire, so that's in our mind for a while, that in turn drops further seeds. Okay, so let's maybe think of an example. Maybe we can use the vegetarian pizza example again, if you don't mind. So, okay, we've already talked a bit about this. We've got our senses on our bodies. We walk past the pizza shop. We might smell, like the smell, and then we smell it, and then it smells good, and we go back and we have a look at a picture of the pizza, or we have a look at the menu, or we go and look at the actual pizza, and then later we buy some pizza, and then we're eating it. So let's just quickly get through that point. Now, when we're eating the pizza, so we're getting various types of pleasant sensations, and there's always a question. Let me maybe phrase it like this. Usually when we're doing something like this, we're eating the pizza and we might say, this pizza tastes good. And maybe we're sitting around with a group of friends, say the pizza tastes good, and somebody else says, oh, it tastes fantastic. Somebody else says, it's wonderful. And then somebody says, no, it doesn't taste good at all. It tastes horrible. Now, if we just stop for a minute, stop, like half a piece of pizza in your mouth, stop, think about it. There's something weird going on here, where the first three people are assigning tastes good to the pizza. We say the pizza tastes good. But look, if the pizza tasted good, then it should taste good to everyone. I mean, the person eating the slice and they say it doesn't taste good, is there something in their slice of pizza? Probably not. It's probably just the same. So why is it that some people feel that it tastes good, which means pleasant sensation, and other people don't think so? Well, the trick here is the nice taste, the pleasant sensation does not come from the pizza. Okay, I repeat, the pleasant sensation does not come from the pizza. If it did, everyone, all the time, anyone that ate the pizza would also have a pleasant sensation. It comes largely from ourselves. And so for some people, for 3 of them, they have seed potentials that when they taste the pizza put in their mouth, it's a pleasant experience. So boom, the sensation is a stimulus that then brings up a pleasant feeling. Okay. For some people, it's not. Now, the question is, why? Why is that the case? Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But you can also think about, for example, how we can be potentially conditioned. So I'll give an example. Just even this morning, just as I was having breakfast, I was doing the bad thing, wasn't eating very mindfully, having breakfast, skimming through the news, and okay, where I am now, it's now September the 12th. Yesterday was the 11th, but now I think for a lot of the USA, it's the 11th. Okay, so 9/11. So we all know what happened on 9/11 back in that day. Great tragedy befell in the US and in New York City and a few other places. So somebody has suggested, in order to commemorate the loss, that they were going to do a flyover, an Air Force jet or Navy jet flyover. And a number of people from around New York and elsewhere just said, this is crazy. That's just going to re-traumatize people. You're going to celebrate that by having a low-flying plane fly over your city. That's going to create a lot of stress for a lot of people, because people still have, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But just think about that for a second. So why did they suggest it? Normally people like flyovers. Like seeing jets fly past. It's a big rush. It's so cool. And there's also, not just the fact of seeing several tons of steel zoom through the air at incredible speed. There's also other concepts as well, remember? Let's just play this out, right? So if you were in the US and you were nationalistic and you see it and it's got your own, it's your own Air Force or your own Navy, it brings up nationalistic pride, it makes you think our country's strong, it makes you think our country can defend ourselves. And of course, I am part of this country, it's my country. So, we condition to it's a good experience. Seeing those jets, it's so cool. Flip it around, just flip it around very quickly. Imagine you lived in the backwoods of Afghanistan or, something like that not so long ago, and you also see a US jet fighter flying past at low speed. Probably not going to bring in those different, those same feelings. Why? The main difference is simply, on one side, a different perception of me and mine. I'm from Afghanistan. That jet is from this other country. That other country is antagonistic, right? That's the other. And suddenly that perception becomes quite the reverse. And of course, the different sensations and experiences that you have with it might be associated with violence and pain. So likewise, when they're saying to do it over New York City, people there have been reconditioned. To them, that experience isn't a pleasant experience, it's a painful experience. They have different underlying seed potentials. So a lot of those underlying seed potentials are, we can see from this example, past experience. They come from past experience. Conditioning is what we would just say in general terms. So some people have a conditioning that the vegetarian pizza tastes good. Some other people might not. Meat lovers are I want real cheese, not vegan cheese. I want pepperoni and ham on my pizza, not this vegetarian stuff. And they experience it as unpleasant. they might also have the perception, this is vegetarian and I'm a meat eater. Therefore, this concept goes against my self-concept. Now, the vegetarian lover, right, eats it, they enjoy it, they are then maybe further planting seeds for more pleasant experiences. They are also further planting seeds which strengthen their perception of self as a vegetarian or a vegan, which means that in the future, right, so a week later they walk past the same shop, when they get those different cognitions going and the sensations and perceptions going, the pleasant sense perception, the, I'm a vegetarian, this is vegetarian pizza, therefore this is my pizza, becomes even stronger, right? You're intensifying that that kind of relationship and that cycle. The meat eater, on the other hand, might be the reverse, right? Next time they won't even eat it. They might just go, oh, I tried a vegetarian pizza once and it was horrible, never again, right? And every time they're saying that, even every time they're thinking that, is actually further strengthening their bad impressions and their conceptualization, which rejects that object. Yeah, how does that go? Is that making sense, everyone? I hope this is making sense to you. I'm just going to flip back here and see if we've got any comments coming through. Okay, no more comments coming through, but like jump in at any time if you want to just say anything in general. Okay, so that's kind of like how this process goes. It's not just, but last week we were talking about how we get this desire and aversion, how we get these self-centered conceptualization, and it can also be like self-centering and other decentering. But now we can also see how these reactions, shall we say, themselves come from past experience. They come from what I'm calling underlying potentials, but also when they occur, they are further putting down potentials for future experience. So a little model here is getting more complex. You might think, whoa, it's getting complicated. Okay, now I did throw in another one. No time to talk about it. I'm just going to flash this on the screen. There's a different model. What I'm showing you here is like my simplified model of certain schools. There are other schools that have other models. There's a late Theravadan philosophical model. And these different things that take place in the processes of cognition and these different elements. Okay, we're going to talk about this some other time. Complex stuff, okay? But let's just go back and then talk about this idea of this alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness. So, key thing is, as we've already seen, so there are reactions and, responses, that are brought about by some kind of sensory stimulation, and that brings about what we might call a dormant potential, like a seed. Okay, so we've got two terms here. Dormant comes from a Latin term meaning sleep. So, like dormitory is a place where you sleep. Dormant means something is asleep. And so this idea that like when something is dormant, it's asleep. And the opposite would be when it wakes up and then it becomes active. Okay. And then we've got this other metaphor here, a seed. So a seed is also a kind of a potential, like a seed's got all the DNA of the plant in it. But while it's a seed, it's not kind of manifesting. Got a little acorn. Maybe if you preserve it well enough, like that giant seed warehouse bank that they've got somewhere up in northern Scandinavia, like in the permafrost, when it's kind of like a natural giant refrigerator. They're storing like hundreds and thousands of different seeds of different plants. Keep it cold enough and they won't sprout and germinate, but they'll still maintain their potential. When you get the conditions right, you get like usually, moisture on the seed, maybe warmer temperatures like springtime, for example. Then the seed sprouts, and then of course later on, many conditions, it grows into the whole tree. So a little acorn can hold that DNA and that potential for a giant oak tree, and it can stay in that acorn, for years, maybe even 10 years. Sometimes seeds can even be viable after 100 years or even longer. It's quite amazing when you think about it. So these kind of potentials that we have in our mind are a bit like seeds within the ground, right? They require certain stimuli in order to make them sprout and grow, and then we have that experience, right? So we've got lots of different potentials for different responses and reactions to things, but most of the time they're all just kind of dormant or asleep, or they're like seeds. They're not growing into living active plants, but then those stimulation come along and wake it up. It becomes active, and then we have some we have desire or greed, or we have jealousy or pride, or some self-view, or whatever. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. And in both cases, both dormant or like a seed. So remember, the seed's like in the soil. When it's in the soil, you kind of can't see it. You don't know what's there. You might dig out your garden and weed your garden and pull out all the weeds. And all you see is kind of like dirt, but it's not just dirt, right? We know if you just leave it, it rains in the spring, all the seeds are going to pop up. So it's not enough to just pull out all the growing plants. You've got to remove all the seeds. And so that's a bit like, I'm going to talk about this later, in like meditation. And meditation is like weeding the garden. I shouldn't say meditation. Just shamatha meditation, just calming meditation is a bit like weeding the garden, but it doesn't remove all the seeds. So once you stop weeding, or you put it like a sheet, plastic sheet over the ground, it kills off all the grass. But when you take the sheet off, give it a few days, there's still seeds in that soil that will then just sprout up again, right? It's not enough to just kill the grass or yatao, just squash the grass or cover the grass so it doesn't get any sunlight. So we've got then two aspects. We have the sprouting of old seed potentials. So we might have experiences in the present that cause past seeds to grow into present fruit, which means, if I just, even so something as simple as if I see an old friend, so I see that person or I might hear them, and then I think like, oh, that is my friend Bob. Okay. Now that thought that comes up, that perception in my mind, that is Bob, comes from past experience of Bob. If I never met Bob before, I wouldn't be able to do that. Right? So that present fruit, that thought that comes in my head, hey, it's Bob, is my present fruit, my present experience that comes from past seeds. Right? And a lot of our perceptions of things, the fact that I can say this is a computer, this is a cup, this is a microphone, these all come from past experiences. Or you can imagine, like learning a new language. We can see every day that we learn, we get new words for things. At first we don't know the names of anything in that language, and then we slowly build it up, the names of things. But we also do the same way for different emotions, like desire and aversion as well. If we encounter something like a person you've never encountered before, even then we do have preconceived ideas, right? But imagine we're like just neutral, never met the person, so you're just kind of entirely neutral. You have some interaction with them, you think, hey, this person's pretty cool. So that was some pleasant experiences. So next time you meet them, like, oh, you're more inclined to experience as pleasant, and that just builds up and builds up. Over time, they become a friend, a good friend, your bestest buddy, or it could be the reverse. So it's past experiences, past potentials growing into present ones, but we also have the same as well. And then the present experiences get replanted back into the mind as new potential future. Well, they become seeds which become future potential experiences as well. Right? So every time we're experiencing things, we are reconditioning ourselves. I think a lot of people, when we think about conditioning, we think about like, how I've been conditioned in the past to bring me up to where I am now. But we tend to, I think less that I'm conditioning myself right now also for my future. And again, I think part of the reason of that is simply we tend to think about our present selves as being more of our real selves than we think about our future selves. And so we often use the idea of conditioning in order to justify who we are in the present. And again, that can be a kind of a self-defense mechanism. When we have faults or we have pains or suffering, we might think, oh, well, I'm like that because my parents, or I'm like that because I had a teacher at elementary school and they made me who I am today, or I grew up in a certain place. So we can use those, and we can see very clearly how they shape ourselves now, but we've also got to keep in mind those conditionings, they're impermanent, right? They're not set, they're not fixed. We can recondition. Now, I think a lot of things, it seems that we're more easily able to be conditioned when we're younger, we're more formative, but it never means that, conditioning never stops. Meditation is actually an important point of getting the mind to a kind of a more supple state, so it's more able to be reconditioned. And you want to keep that in mind after meditation, particularly calming meditation. The mind is more easily able to be conditioned, and that's why after meditation a lot of times we'll finish with something like a wholesome practice, dedication of merit, for example. And that's really reforming ourselves for future potentials. And we can also kind of keep that in mind as well when we might have some experience, something happens that we might experience as being painful, we might get very negative about it and might be thinking all sorts of like very negative things. But keep in mind, when we're doing that, we're just further conditioning ourselves for the future. Yeah, I know, easier said than done. Okay. And so then we can see the cyclic nature of these mental states. If we just kind of let things go on, we have our past conditioning, which shapes not just our experiences of pleasant, unpleasant in the present, but also our whole sense of who we are. And that whole sense of who we are and what we find pleasant and unpleasant then shapes our behavior in the present, which just constantly reinforces those things. And if we don't make changes and we just kind of, if you imagine someone who's a really, really like, I grew up, I'm the 20th generation in my family born in this very town, in this very same house. My family has for 20 generations always done exactly the same job, and I'm going to follow in their footsteps and do exactly the same job. We eat this food, we do these traditions, we like these things and hate these things. And you just kind of never change that, and it's not just for our own selves, but like life after lifetime. That kind of mentality is very, very solid and very firm. And unless something really drastic comes along, it's just kind of going to continue in that same pattern, that same way. Now I'm not going to say that's good or bad. That could be good, could be habits of doing good things for many generations and you're born into that family. But it can also include bad things as well. But we also need to see that, and it might be very difficult if once things become really set and heavily cyclic, very difficult to see that it could be anything other than that. So if we're in a negative cycle, it can be difficult to see that there's some way to get out of that, because it just feels like that's just how it's always been, that's just how it always is. But we do have to keep in mind impermanence. It is possible to condition, recondition, but all these things kind of feed back into each other. So if we want to make changes in one area, we might need to change other areas as well, right? Because they will mutually reinforce. Now, one other thing I was going to talk about today, time is kind of running out here. I was going to talk about how this relates to rebirth. So I'll just mention it very briefly. So the idea of the alaya vijnana, so alaya just means storehouse, was a storehouse that's like the seeds. You store the seeds in a storehouse, like a greenhouse. All those potentials together are the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness, and then they're constantly manifesting under the circumstances of different conditions around us and different stimuli around us. And another important element of that is also that when we then die, so on the death of the physical body, those seeds continue on. And that's why it's called a storehouse consciousness. They continue on into the next lifetime. And thus we take all that conditioning from this lifetime into the next lifetime. Now, there might be some other questions here. You might ask, I thought in Buddhism consciousness doesn't continue. I thought consciousness doesn't go from lifetime to lifetime. Isn't that the idea of this idea of this Atman, this self or the soul? The Buddhist view is a bit different, because the seeds, even if we say you've got this whole giant body of all these subconscious seeds, they're still changing. Remember, seeds manifest, they get reconditioned and they get replanted. Manifest, reconditioned and replanted. So those seeds are still constantly changing. They're not like this unchanging permanent entity, right? So when we say that the seeds in this lifetime, even the seeds that I had when I was younger and the seeds that I have now, some of those seeds when I was younger have already manifested, and what's been planted is new and different seeds. And then change up into the present. And then maybe from here, imagine if I live many decades into the future, who knows? Some of the seeds I have now are also going to manifest and change and get replaced down. So the seeds are themselves constantly changing. And then at the end of this lifetime and the next lifetime, the seeds from that one are going to be different from now. They're going to be different from when I was younger. You might imagine it a bit like this. So again, using the idea of seeds in a field. So imagine you've got a field just of grass and wildflowers. You might look at it one year, you might come back 20 years later and look at the same field, and it might look kind of the same. It might be similar types of grasses and wildflowers. There might be some more and some less. And you might think, well, it's just the same field. But if you think about it, actually it's not. Even if it's the same species, but the ones that you saw 20 years ago, they grew, they flowered, those seeds. Then the plant died, the seeds fell into the soil, and then the next spring, a same species of flower, but a different flower grew up in its place. And it flowered and created seeds, it died, into the soil, and again, the next year, same species grew, but it's a different flower. And over the years, sometimes one species might take over, another one might, disappear. Something might blow in from a nearby field. Every actual individual plant in that field has changed and different from 20 years ago. But on the whole, it might kind of look similar. If you left it long enough, if you came back after 100 years, it might look totally different. This used to be, I don't know, some kind of wildflower, and now it's changed to something totally different. And that could happen too. In the course of a lifetime or multiple lifetimes, those potentials might change so much, we're almost like a totally different person. But if we looked at it in a time lapse, if we looked at it day by day, time lapse, we'd see that, no, it just slowly changed moment by moment by moment. When we're looking at it in close, in a short period of time, it doesn't look like it changes much. When we look at it further away and over a longer period of time, things can change massively. And so this process of these seeds and conditioning and reconditioning is, of course, basically saying what direction it's changing in. So this idea of the storehouse consciousness is also very tightly related to the idea of our continuity from one life to the next life, and so on from there. Okay, now looking at the time, we're almost up to 10 o'clock already. We need to do some meditation. Okay, I think it's time. Let me just have some water. Time for us to do a few little stretches, as usual, and then we can do some sitting meditation. Okay, flip camera. Okay, everyone. I hope you're going to join us, join me. Time's always short, huh? Always talking too much. Okay, so just our basics. My ankles. Putting your focus into the ankle as it's moving, back the other way. Okay. this direction. Back the other way. Okay, on the knees, just bending down. Oh, lots of popping sounds in my knees. Okay. Out of the way. Okay, back up to the hips. Hands on your hips and just circles at your hips. Okay, so as we said earlier, I like to just hit these key joints in the body, the lower body, ankles, knees and hips, because these are going to help us get our good sitting posture. And then of course a little bit with the spine and opening up the chest, spine and neck, and opening up the chest, along with the breath. Okay. Hands together, stretching up in my limited ceiling space. Breathing in, stretching down. Breathing in, coming up. Stretching down. Coming out, breathing in. Stretching down. Breathe again, coming up. And relaxing to the sides. Feet apart. Just go up, over, stretching the side of the body. Up, breathing in, over, breathing out. Okay, I'm just going to keep it super simple today, because time is short. The neck. Okay, grab your cushion, if you've got one. Take your seat. Okay, flip back to the camera. Okay, again, finding whatever posture works good for you. Key thing, of course, being that your hips can roll forward, so you're not slouching back. You can roll forward, keep your back up nice and straight is the key point here. So I should come over a little bit this way. Stretch to the sides. Okay. Take your posture. Now, yeah, time is a bit short today, so try to keep it simple. Now I have been just kind of, as we're doing the meditation, I just give some like basic little mini guided instructions along the way for a breath meditation. I'm not sure that works for you people or not, so you know, if you do have any thoughts, you think like, hey Matt, we're meditating, just shut up dude, let us meditate. Okay, just like let me know if you think that's good and you find it helps to keep you focused, or you know, it helps to stop your mind wandering off, and you think, yeah, like it's good, or you even want more instruction, yeah, again, just let me know. Some people say shut up, and some people say talk more. Don't know what I'll do. Okay, I'll probably talk more and ask the other people to turn the volume down. Okay, anyway, now that you're sitting comfortably, take off your glasses and whatnot. Let us begin. So nice, couple of nice deep full breaths to begin with. Filling the lungs and expelling all the air. You can make some last adjustments to your posture. Make sure you're sitting comfortably, so you're upright and alert, but also relaxed. Mindfully breathing in and mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in and mindfully breathing out. And you can just use that simple sentence to help keep your mind focused on your breath. Mindfully breathing in or mindfully inhaling, mindfully exhaling. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. And you can just note when you are breathing in, if it's a long breath or a short breath. And when you're breathing out, again, just be mindfully aware of a long breath or a short breath. Mindfully breathing in and mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, experiencing the whole body. Mindfully breathing out, experiencing the whole body. And you can just feel the breath as a physical action. You can feel that movement of the body with each and every breath. Mindfully breathing in, experiencing the whole body. Mindfully breathing out, experiencing the whole body. Mindfully breathing in, relaxing the whole body. Mindfully breathing out, relaxing the whole body. Just remember, while we are relaxing, still maintaining our good upright posture to keep that balance between relaxation but also alertness. We don't want to be alert but tense, or relaxed and drowsy. We want to be alert and relaxed. So if you feel any parts of your body that are tense, just use your mind to give that body part a little instruction to relax. You might also feel that not just around your body in general, but also around your face, little micro tensions. Let them all relax. Mindfully breathing in, relaxing the body. Mindfully breathing out, relaxing the body. Just being alert and aware to mental agitation, or also dullness and sleepiness. You can use your posture to help to regulate those two. If you're very dull, you can perhaps even open your eyes. Don't look around, but just open your eyes. Help to keep you awake. Mindfully breathing in, relaxing the body. Mindfully breathing out, relaxing the body. Take a nice deep full breath in. Slowly exhale all the way out. Just move your upper body gently left and right. Just move from a still state to an active state. Just stretch your neck and head, roll your shoulders, open your hands, stretch your arms. Warm up our palms. Cover over the eyes. Massage around the eyes. The forehead. Temples and cheeks. Our ears. Back of the head and neck. Shoulders, down the arms, from the chest, and the abdomen, and the lower back. Breath in, and we can stretch forward to the left, over the left knee. We're going to stretch on the right side of your body here, and vice versa over the right side, and then we'll stretch the left side. Back up. Okay, just unfold your legs, and if you need to like massage, pat down your legs, or what have you, then just feel free to do so. I'm going to move forward so we can get into our final phase of today's class. Okay. Oh, need to move the camera up. Okay. I'm feeling pretty good after that little session. Not very long, but you know, even 15-20 minutes can be very beneficial. It's a good start to my weekend, I feel. Okay, how is everyone doing? Okay, oh, we got some comments there coming through. Let me see, have to go back a little bit. Okay, some comments from Venerable Rukai, good to see you as well. From Alexander and from Jay Lee. Yes, thanks. Okay, I'm not sure what the yes thanks is. Maybe for the explanation earlier. You're welcome. The flower and seed example is quite helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're referring to when I'm talking about like the field and the different flowers, or you know, I might say like a forest or a piece of land. I do. I think in my own mind too that kind of idea does help as well. It's always in a constant state of change. If we look at over a short term, we might not see the change very much. If we look over a long term, the change is bigger. But that change is never an abrupt change. It's always a, you know, when you see the whole process, you can always see between this, you know, just day after day, it's not a very big difference. But it doesn't take much for small day-to-day differences to lead to a big change overall, and that's important. And that can also go both ways. You know, you often hear stories. I was just watching this little YouTube clip. It had been posted on Facebook the other day, and it was I think it was someone practicing some form of Chinese Buddhism, and they were saying, oh, just in 10 years, I mean 10 years isn't a short time, but I often meet people that start meditating, never meditated before, suddenly for some reason want to make some lifestyle changes, start meditating, and they can feel, even within, you know, just a couple of months of, say, daily practice, they can feel those changes. So, you know, that's quite powerful and profound. Okay, from GW, that's a good metaphor for explaining the storehouse consciousness. But in my mind, I still have a question. The new flower that has bloomed, how can we identify it as your next life when it's a totally different being species and not really the previous physical you? Okay, so we're kind of mixing our metaphors there. Well, the new flower that bloomed isn't a different species, right? When the sunflower grows and forms seeds and drops seeds, they're also sunflowers. Over a long period of time, of course, even within the same species, DNA isn't fixed, and it can have gradual changes and so on like that. Yeah, so the question is, how can we identify it as your next life? Maybe we take a step back and just say, do we identify it? I mean, even between, to use the same argument that you're using, the body that you had when you were a baby, a newborn baby, and the body you have now, probably you identify it as being the same body. But I will say, every single cell in that body has changed. Every single cell has changed and been replaced. Right, so daily our body, we're eating food, we're breathing in air, we are reconstructing cells, other cells are dying and being shed from the body in various ways. So why do we think it's the same one? Now, even if it repeats the same DNA, remember DNA is a pattern. It doesn't refer to the actual cells or molecules or atoms that make it up, right? So when we're reconstructing it on the same pattern, but the actual material is different. And the fact is, again, back to the idea that day to day we don't notice the difference. Like when we're kids or teenagers, we don't really notice every day we're growing fast. So when we go see grandma and granddad, once a year or something like that, and they go, "Oh, you've grown so much," because they don't see the day-to-day changes. And so it's the same, like every single atom in our bodies when we were born and that we have now have changed, but we do identify it. And so it's the same in the field. We're not saying that the flower is the next life, but what we're doing is we're taking this aggregate of the whole field. And even if 1 year and we come back a year later, we still look at the same field and it's pretty much the same. It's only changed a little bit. That's enough in our mind, because our mind doesn't say it's going to be exactly the same for it to be the same field, right? We're not like that. We take some basic things. Now, our minds work on this kind of fuzzy logic. It's like, it's close enough, it must be the same one. And then the next year, close enough, it's the same one, or the next day. And many days like that, we put them together, we still think it's still the same one. And we've created this category in our mind, that field, and we've got all these images in it of every time we've seen it that constitutes our sense of identity for that. And we do it for ourselves as well. Now, often we attribute it on the body, right? That's one of the basic things that we attribute it on. And we often do that, particularly for other people, because we don't know other people's minds. We know their bodies. We see their bodies. But in terms of personality, right, that can be very similar. Or take it, for example, if you meet someone, you might meet a man or a woman, and then you meet their son or their daughter, and you find out that the son or the daughter is a lot like them. You kind of think that they're like a mini me, or a mini you, right? We see similarities in the personality, on the way in which they behave. And again, it doesn't have to be 100% the same, but it's close enough that our mind and the way it classifies and categorizes things is we put it in the same category. Once we start putting it in the same category, we take it as the same thing. So, the not being the physical you, yep, that's one element that can change. But in terms of the other content of experience, it can be. Okay. It's a big topic, I know. Maybe we can talk about it a bit later. Time is getting on. But thank you. It's a good and important question. Okay, Hanuman, thank you. And Nathaniel, find the instruction helpful. Good to see you back again, Nathaniel. Hope you're doing well. Okay, but yes, time is getting on. that time, so we need to wrap up at the end. We're going to do our usual flip on over to the dedication. So I forgot the invocation at the start of class again. I need to put that on my... I have a little piece of paper that gives me my basic instructions for today. I need to put that at the top, underline it. Okay, so let's just wrap it up with the dedication, shall we, everyone? As I said earlier, after a meditation session, our minds are more supple, and that means that they're more easily able to be shaped, conditioned. It's also very similar to, this studies have been shown, people coming out of sensory deprivation, as soon as you give them some object of stimulation, they will quickly attach to it much stronger than they would usually. So it's a bit similar. Meditation, particularly shamatha, calming meditation, can be a bit like that. It's a voluntarily induced sensory stimulation. What it means is we're not following the senses outwards, we're controlling the senses and focusing them on one object. So when we finish, the mind's a bit more, it's not just kind of, normally it's just pattern, bouncing off different things we encounter. It's now calm, and so when we present an object to it, it can focus on it and see it much clearer. So it's important that we then focus it on wholesome things, positive things, things that benefit ourselves and benefit others. And what better way to do that than this? Okay, so let's join our palms, shall we, everyone? And recite together. I go to the Buddha for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall realize the great path and aspire to the supreme state of mind. I go to the Dharma for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall deeply enter the collection of teachings and attain wisdom like the ocean. I go to the Sangha for refuge, vowing that all sentient beings shall unite and lead the community in harmony without any hindrance. Okay, everyone. Thank you. It's been great seeing you back again. Today was week 4 of our Buddhist psychology. We've got 2 more to go. Next week, the meditative mind. Okay, everyone. Take care. I'm going to tune out here and see you next week.